Kia ora koutou. I'm Marten, Rabarts, Director of New Zealand International Film Festival, Whānau Mārama. Here I'm talking with the director and the protagonist of the film The Girl on the Bridge. I'd like you to meet them. Kia ora. Kia ora. Jazz, Leanne. You've seen the film because you're watching this, so you'll know what a personal journey this was for Jazz, and I think also Leanne. It became very clear that the people who wrapped around the making of Jazz's web series and also the making of this film really became something of a very close-knit community around the making of the work, and engaged deeply in the issues. How did you meet? Because you made a film of a film, or you made a film, within Leanne's film. How did that come about? Because, well, for you, making your own web series, and you're studying film, I gather, right, is a challenge enough. And then to have someone go, oh, by the way, let's just make a film of you while you make your first, big production. Thank you for saying yes, because Leanne has shared a beautiful film with us. But how did you meet?
When Jazz got funded to make the web series, they invited me, the producers, Cass and Alex, invited me to come and maybe give her some advice on how to tell the story, because she was new to long-form storytelling. She'd been telling short stories on the internet with huge success through her charity Voices of Hope, but she'd never told a long-form story. So they asked me to come along and maybe help a little bit, and I went, oh, I don't know about helping on this. I'd like to make a film about the process the journey you're going to go on, because I knew it would be a journey for Jazz.
You could smell it as a documentary maker. You could feel the story was about to unfold.
Yeah.
And when Leanne told you that your story is about to unfold and I'd like to film it, was it an immediate yes, or?
No, I don't think it definitely wasn't an immediate yes. I think, I was still, 2 terms into film school at this point, and it was my first production, and I kind of had it in my head that I was going to be directing this, not that I would be the subject, and that was a little bit scary. But I also, knew of Leanne's work and trusted that she would tell this story well, and so eventually I did agree, and I'm glad that I did.
Yeah, and I think it wasn't too long. At the beginning, when we were watching you directing, because you were a little self-conscious that there was another director watching you direct.
One of the best directors watching me direct.
Who you'd been introduced to as a kind of mentor.
Yeah.
It's like, how did this happen?
Yeah. So, but it didn't take that long, I think, before. And actually, we include in the film, once, occasionally you'd look at me and sort of say, what do you think about what we're doing? And that was all fine. And we acknowledged that in the film. So it's the third, we really decided to pull the fourth wall down and just go, look, we're not going to pretend that we're not doing this, that they're not doing that we're all not doing it together. Because it was kind of a weird, it's quite hard to explain. When you try to explain it, it's quite hard.
Well, we see aspects of it in the film, this film itself, The Girl on the Bridge itself, that there are layers of, you said you tore the wall down, the boundaries between different roles and functions. Your producers, for both of you, was the same people who were producing the web series as well as the documentary, became very close, very emotionally engaged, very understandably so. There was a lot of concern for you, and I think the audience, when that was being voiced by, which in your brilliant editing as well, by the way. You know, you start to bring in these voices of concern at the time where the audience, you know, for me, I was starting to worry about you as a character under all this pressure as well. So it clearly wasn't just your regular film shoot.
No, and the producers too. I don't think when I first pitched the idea to them that I should make a film about Jazz and the journey she was going on, that they realized they were going to be all over it too. You know, they were a bit kind of taken aback when they looked at the first edit and realized they're in, you know, a lot of the film themselves. So it was a bit of, everybody just had to kind of put trust, there was a lot of trust, basically, yeah.
Talk a little bit about your web series, Jessica's Tree. You pitched that. We see that in the film brilliantly, by the way. That was like the best kind of Lion's Den performance ever. You knew what you wanted to do. This was a tool to reach out to the community that you yourself have been part of, who struggle with questions of to exist or not to exist. Do you tell us about the making of that? Because we will now go and watch that, if we haven't watched it already, having seen this documentary. But talk a little bit about Jessica's Tree. I'd love to hear some more about it.
So when I initially pitched Jessica's Tree, I did so, obviously Jessica was a good friend of mine, and she always wanted her story to be told. And when I was looking at what was going on in society and that people weren't understanding why people were ending up suicidal and why we had the worst youth suicide stats in the developed world, I kind of thought, man, I wonder if we can show the stories behind these statistics and a story behind these statistics, if it might help people understand and therefore respond better. And so we started, you know, telling the story, and I think it was probably one of the hardest things that I have done, because I obviously knew Jess and didn't realize that as I was creating this, that I was still dealing with my own guilt of what had happened and wanting to be able to do everything I possibly could to change the outcome. But we did it, and then when it went out, the response was incredible, and it was, you know, everything that Jess would have wanted.
When you say the response has been incredible, I hope from the people you intended it for, but it's been recognised also around the world in ways that. So tell us how's it been going for Jessica's Tree, and what's happening with it now?
I think it's won about 15 awards around the world, which is really cool. It won last year at the New Zealand TV Awards, which was really awesome because it's a hard story. It's a story about suicide. It's a real story, and it's the kind of story that 5 years ago we would have shut down, that wouldn't be allowed on media. And so for it to not only be seen, but for it to be acknowledged and recognised as a story that's been told well, but a story that's making impact.
That needs to be told.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of controversy around the first season of 13 Reasons Why, which also, you know, very different conflicting points of view around that. But also finally, I think another story that needed to be told, like as Jessica's Tree was.
We learned from that too, though, because that actually happened right. 13 Reasons Why had just finished when you were just starting Jessica's Tree and I was just starting The Girl on the Bridge. Yeah. And we did learn some lessons from the conversation that was happening around that.
I went through every critique of 13 Reasons Why and made sure that I hit it on Jessica's Tree.
And the makers of those series now are also very articulate about their motivations and reasons behind. So when you learned from that experience, what was it, Leanne, that you felt would be the thing that came out of this film that was different to Jessica's Tree?
Jazz, really. You know, Jessica's Tree tells the story of the young woman who's not here anymore. And The Girl on the Bridge tells the story of the girl who's here, the young woman who's here, really. And Jazz has managed to take a difficult subject and find a way to communicate. And I really just felt that if I could capture that, if I could capture Jazz's ability to communicate, that we would have a film. You know, it's scary making a film about suicide. You know, people are going, a lot of people are going, are you crazy? You know, blah, blah, blah. But I just really felt that this was an opportunity to kind of capture somebody who had found a way to communicate and to connect. I mean, Jazz is getting millions of young people from around the world reaching out to her and connecting with her. And I really felt it was an important subject. I just felt we can't keep pretending it's not happening.
No, absolutely.
And this seemed to me to be a way to have that conversation. And I knew too that in following Jazz's journey on Jessica's Tree, that all the conversations around the making of Jessica's Tree would be revelatory. That we would learn about how hard it is to have the conversation by watching the conversation. And so, you know, it's a bit meta, but I really felt this was an opportunity to talk about the topic itself, how hard it is to have the conversation, and what it means to be a survivor, and then as the film progressed, what it means to be an activist as well.
And there are different levels of communication that you see in action. You're doing a TED Talk, you know, as good a TED Talk as I've ever seen. And so you're clearly a gifted orator, a communicator. And yet the deeper you dig, even for the gifted communicator, it becomes harder to access those layers of communication that we see in the film, the things that maybe you haven't been speaking about on the TED Talk that you still have to come to terms with. So I think it's a really interesting examination of that thing, communication, which you just mentioned as well, and the struggle towards remaining authentic as well in that communication.
And in, you know, suicide is a subject that is sort of caked in fear. Everyone's afraid. You're afraid to say the wrong thing. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I say something and that leads someone to take their own, you know, so when you're dealing with a subject that's so full of fear, then communication is key, and that's
Absolutely.
what I really felt that Jazz, you know, brought to the table.
The journey of the film, and you as that main character on that journey, you learn things about yourself along the ways, and we get to learn them from the film. Did you have any idea that there was going to be so much personal growth for you, or personal understanding when you set off on, you know, okay, make a film, I'm going to make my web series?
Absolutely not. No.
I thought my growth was dealt with.
I did. I was 22,
Yeah.
and I was like, I know the things that I need to do, and I have grown out of all of these things, and I've dealt with it all. And then, you know, as things progressed, and it honestly wasn't until I watched the film for the first time, which, you know, wasn't until they had the first cut, that I was like, oh my gosh, so much has changed. There are things in the film that I say back from when I was 22 that I wouldn't say now.
Yep.
And things that I have learned and responses. And I think the growth over the last few years has been pretty significant, and I didn't expect it at all.
Because it's a 3-year, you know, it's a 3-year journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you grow as a filmmaker? You're an experienced filmmaker, you've got loads of, and your other film at the moment out in the world is, you know, we need to talk about AI, very different subject matter, but, you know, being this close to something so kind of visceral, did that change how you make a film, perhaps, the way you approach a subject?
I don't know if it changed the way I make films, which is I don't know what that is. So, you know, you sort of
Don't tell us. We don't want you to lose your mojo.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know if you're aware, but I lost my brother to suicide while I was making this film. And so clearly that doesn't happen to you, you know, where your own life suddenly intersects with the film you're making. And I have to say that was, I don't know what the right word is. The fact that I was making this particular film at that particular moment in life seems like it would be a bad thing, but actually it was an amazing thing because A, I was able to deal with some of my own personal stuff, and B, because I could learn from Jazz how to navigate what was a really terrible time in my life. And, you know, and I may be the experienced filmmaker, but in that circumstance, Jazz was the person who was holding my hand a little bit. So it was a weird intersection of the art and the real world in a way. Yeah, and I guess it was different because I don't normally appear in my films, and I sort of kind of do a little bit of a
sneak in from the
sneaky
side,
thing in the film, and that was something that wasn't in the early cuts. I wasn't in the early cuts, and people kind of felt that my presence was needed. But anyway, yeah.
It does make sense. It's just a reminder that there is this other set of eyes there, and also very engaged. It's a really beautiful film. Thanks for sharing your journey, but what I would love to know before we wrap up is what's next for you? I'm sure all of your work as an activist is continuing, and we saw in the credit sequence of this film lots of marvelous other things you've been doing since. But as a filmmaker, let's talk about that before we move on.
As a filmmaker, I'm now looking at what we've done here in New Zealand over the last few years and seeing how we can take that global. I've learned recently that this isn't a New Zealand issue, this is a global issue, and it's ridiculous what's going on. And so I want to tell that story. I want to tell the story of the people from the US all the way through to Kenya, Sierra Leone, United Kingdom. So that's kind of where I'm heading at the moment, as well as continuing all of the stuff with Voices of Hope and telling the lived experience stories.
Great.
Yeah. Jazz is a ambassador for the World Health Organization.
I do a lot of stuff with them. They obviously did our endorsement for the film and spoke at the UN General Assembly where we launched the world's first global mental health campaign, which was cool.
In Buckingham Palace.
Yes.
Even that. Congratulations. I mean, really, it's amazing what you do, and we've seen you in action, as it were, in the film. Thanks for bringing yourself to this film. Leanne, thanks for bringing the film to the festival. Before we wrap up, just remind us, if people are watching this, where they can reach out if they need to talk about the issues in the film, if you could just remind people, and we'll also have it on screen as well. But
yeah, absolutely. If you need to talk to someone immediately, the best number to call is 1737. Here in New Zealand, you can call or text them at any time. It's trained counsellor on the other side of the line. There's also a lot of resources with places like the Mental Health Foundation, Youth Line, and so make sure you jump on those. And also there's helplines on our website, which is the Voices of Hope as well, which has your lived experience. But if you do need someone to talk to, 1737.
And the Girl on the Bridge website also has information that people might find useful.
the Girl on the Bridge website for the film itself.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you both. Thank you both for your stories and for the making of them. Yeah.
Thank you for
And good
having
luck
me.
with the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks.